So immediately on my left is Representative Fran Millar, who is in the Senate District representing parts of DeKalb and Gwinnett counties. The interesting thing about him is he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Economics.
You're my hero.
And works in with Wells Fargo Insurance Services. He serves as chair of the Retirement Committee, vice chair of the MARTA, Metropolitan Atlanta Transit Overview Committee, secretary to Health and Human Services Committee, Education and Youth and Rules Committees, and he started in the state legislature in 1998 in the House of Representatives. There's a lot more there. And then our next panelist is Dr. Martha Reichrath. She is currently the Deputy State Superintendent of Schools for the Department of Education. Now, talk about having experience and responsibility relevant to this question. Her area of responsibility in education is curriculum, instruction, assessment, and accountability. She is an educator herself. She has been in public education for more than 40 years. One thing that's interesting to me, being a person who follows corporate turnarounds, is that she was the turnaround principal at Chamblee High School. And another point that really struck me was in her bio, it indicates that the high school that she turned around is still a shining testimony to the power of high expectations and establishment of a culture of excellence. Okay, then the next panelist is Jane Robbins. Jane is an attorney, and her work is in education policy, student privacy, and parents' rights issues. She works with one of the groups that I work with often, ALEC, and has authored and crafted and drafted a number of pieces of legislation on education issues and other issues. She taught in legal writing at Emory Law School, and has served as a practicing attorney and has written in a broad number of places. Native of South Carolina, and a lot of written work out there that's again accessible on the web. It is full of facts and information. And last but not least, Senator Ligon, William Ligon, who is with the Georgia State Senate District 3. And I warned him I was going to say this. The thing that struck me here is that he lives on St. Simon's Island with his wife, a former educator, and 5 children. He joined the Senate, first elected in November 2010, and has been very, very active on the political and legislative side on the Common Core Standards issues. He's chairman of the Senate State and Local Government Affairs Committee, vice chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, member of Judiciary, Ethics, Health and Human Services committees, and a number of other, served in other committees the prior year in his freshman term, and was also a municipal court judge for the city of Brunswick for 16 years. So I think you will agree that we have a range of expertise here and a lot of preparation and thought about these issues. And so there are our panelists. So I'd like to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. Okay, Mr. Timekeeper. Senator Millar, would you like to begin?
Thank you very much, Christine. My name is Fran Millar, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the Fulton County Republicans for holding this discussion tonight, because the purpose of this is to inform people and give them some ideas and correct some facts and go forward from there. Ironically, Senator Ligon and I, he's probably one of my best friends in the Senate. We happen to have different positions on this, and yet I know you and members of the press over there may be disappointed. We're going to show you that Republicans can have a disagreement and still have civil discourse, so it may disappoint you all tonight. But I think I'd like to start off with that most of my opinions are based upon people that I've known for a long time, including this lady on my left. And I'll give you some examples, okay? Alvin Wilbanks, Superintendent, Gwinnett County Schools, longest serving superintendent in the state. 2010, National Urban School District of the Year. 2010, the first school in Georgia to implement Common Core, Peachtree Ridge High School. Very impressive man. He spoke the other night, very positive about the Common Core. Some of the sources of some of the things we talked to you about tonight, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. For most of us as Republicans, that's the conservative think tank. That's the one we go to. We may not agree with them on all their positions, but they're very well respected between Kelly and Benita, that particular organization. The Georgia Partnership for Education, which is the Georgia Chamber of Commerce arm, which is headed by Steve Doninger, former Fulton County School Superintendent. And finally, the Southern Regional Education Board, which to me is probably one of the best education organizations I know. They represent states from Delaware to Oklahoma. I didn't know those states were in the South, but after I got involved with the organization, I understood why they wanted to be part of it. Any discussion of Common Core has to start with what it's about, and it's about standards. And in the simplest terms, when we talk about standards, we talk about the knowledge and the skill level of a particular child in a given subject at the end of a particular grade level. For example, in this case, we're talking at the present time, English, language arts, and mathematics. That's a lot different from curriculum. It was very interesting the other night when Superintendent Wilbanks was talking. He said, ever since we've had standards in the state, starting in 1985 with the Quality Core Curriculum, and then back in 2004, we adopted the Georgia Performance Standards. He's convened an advocacy group to make sure that they look at the curriculum almost each and every year. I found that very interesting. Some of you, I think Judy, you out there were at that meeting, and to get involvement, because the curriculum deals with how a teacher teaches, okay? You know, what students are doing in the classroom day by day, okay? What textbooks are being used. These are all local decisions. They're not decided by the state. Governor Deal has put out an executive order that will continue here in the state, as well as some other things. But that's very, very important because people get standards and curriculum confused. I think that's an important point. A couple of the other things that have come about recent times on the Common Core. Senator Ligon and I happen to agree on some of the subjects of Common Core. The assessment piece, it needs a lot of work. If you've been reading the AJC, there's your plug, guys, the last few days about the tests that we presently have, the error rates, etc. If you're going to have assessments, you can't have that happen with Common Core. And so that's a big issue. He and I have talked about it. And in Common Core, they talk about the cost of the assessments with Park and the other group. It could be $30 or $40 million. Well, I will tell you this, we spend about $8 billion in public education right now, and I don't want to waste 30 or 40 million, but that's not the end of the world if we actually get some tests right and do away with a lot of stupid tests, but I don't think we personally need, with all due respect to the Department of Education. Again, Governor Deal is trying to alleviate some concerns with his executive order. Folks, we've been sharing data for years in this state on an aggregate basis. We do not share it on individual students. The executive order covers that. And again, he emphasizes here in Georgia, according to our Constitution, we will not give up control to the federal government. Bottom line is this, for me in the Common Core. I truly believe when I look, and I'd like you to remember this statistic of all the things I just said to you. When we have kids going to college in this state, and somewhere between 25 and 50% of them require remedial education, we got a problem. And we have to face that problem. This is not a panacea. Common Core is not going to cure everything. But we live in a global world. And other than Friday night football, where I live, Dunwoody plays Lakeside. It's much more important to have the kids at Dunwoody do against the rest of the nation and the rest of the world. Thank you again for being here tonight. We look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Good evening. I would also like to thank the Fulton GOP for having us tonight. This is a great idea and a great opportunity, and appreciate all y'all coming out and missing the Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech game for this. We'll try to get you home by halftime. I wanted to share something. I went to a conference on Monday down at the Woodruff Arts Center, and part of the conference was about education in the 21st century. I took lots of notes. It wasn't about Common Core specifically, but it was, a lot of the speakers were these national sort of Harvard progressive types who were telling us what we need to do with education in the 21st century. And there were three takeaways, I guess, from that. One is that we need less focus on academic knowledge, because you can always Google something if you don't know it. So don't spend so much time on academic knowledge. Greater focus on 21st century skills. What this means is things like collaboration and cooperation and communication, and all these other things that for some reason always start with C. And then generally it should be less about what students know than about their personal characteristics. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember outcome-based education. That's what they were describing. I spent 6 hours listening to them describe outcome-based education. And they didn't call it that. They call it something different now, but that's what it was. And this is exactly the philosophy that is behind Common Core. We're told that this is standards, it's not curriculum. And it is true that the local districts will be allowed to pick their own curriculum. They can choose one Common Core aligned book over a different Common Core aligned book. Also, the two terms tend to get blended together. This was from a PowerPoint in the Georgia Department of Education in February of 2012 that said Common Core GPS, a curriculum for preparing a workforce for the future. And that's what they're doing, they're preparing a workforce. But we're told not to worry about this. The parents shouldn't worry about losing control because the experts have looked at this and it's good. So what do we get? We get a radical new structure in which the control rests not in the state of Georgia, but with private interests, with other states, and with the U.S. Department of Education in Washington. We never voted for that. We get math standards that have been imposed on us that are admittedly designed to prepare students for non-selective community colleges. We never voted for that. We get English standards that follow a trade school mentality, that if it's something you're not going to see on your job, you really shouldn't spend that much time on it. So if Paradise Lost is not part of your job responsibilities, why waste time on it now? We never voted for that. We get the cutting edge assessments, and they talked a lot about assessments at this conference that I went to. They don't want multiple choice tests. They don't want something that really tests academic knowledge. They want tests that are more subjective and that test your skills and your characteristics. Personal skills, personal characteristics. We never voted for that. And they have dictated that our teacher evaluations will be tied to the results of these experimental tests. We never voted for that. They have instituted ruinous unfunded mandates on the states and the local districts. They have connected these new standards to massive, intrusive data collection systems, data collection and data sharing. The standards themselves don't require that, but the entire setup, the entire scheme requires that. The executive order was a good step in the first direction, but we really need tight legislation to nail that down. The Common Core scheme essentially is elitism run amok, is what it is. It assumes that Georgia parents and Georgia teachers are incapable of educating our children without help from really smart people in Washington, whether they're in private organizations or in the U.S. Department of Education, as though those really smart people had done such a great job up to now. This new iteration of centralization and control, centralized control, will destroy whatever innovation we have in our education. Now, where did the problems in education come from? Well, you could spend months talking about that. I suggest they came from the centralization that started when the federal government started to creep into things and start dictating what we were going to do. I don't think the problems of centralization can be solved by more centralization. Why can't we be free to do what we want to with our education without having the strings of the federal government or a consortia of other states telling us what we can or can't do? Thank you.
Folks, I'm going to start, and I am Martha Reichrath. I am Deputy State Superintendent right now, work with the arenas of curriculum instruction, assessment, and accountability. Before I have served in this present job, I served for Governor Perdue as an accountability agency head, so I have been now working at the state level for about a decade, about 11 years actually. I want to start with, first of all, a plea to you, because I think our children in this state deserve for us to find some unification in the direction we're going to be taking. Just today at our State Board of Education meeting, We reacted, the State Board of Education reacted, and I believe Lisa Tenamore. Lisa, would you raise your hand? She is one of our State Board members. She was present with us, and they reacted to a direction from Governor Deal to take a look at these standards in a very formal way, to make sure that these standards were as every Georgian would want them to be. Standards that will help our teachers to define what a youngster needs to be competitive whenever they walk out the door of a high school, so they never get a door closed and they can go on to pursue whatever avenue of next post-secondary education they want to pursue. Whether it's the world of work, whether it's a technical college, whether it's a baccalaureate institution, the military, so that they're prepared. So today, the State Board put a process in place for a very, very specific introspection of the CCGPS, which are college and career ready Georgia performance standards, certainly infused with the Common Core. I want to tell you how that process worked in Georgia. It was 2003 when we first started working on the Georgia Performance Standards. As a high school principal, I spent 17 years in the principalship, and as a high school principal, I didn't use the state's curriculum very much. It was not rigorous enough, it was not challenging, it was not certainly complex enough to take what we thought as a faculty our students needed to take them to the next level. So in 2003, we began working on that curriculum. I was at the governor's office at that time, but worked very closely with the Department of Education. The Georgia Performance Standards were birthed for every subject, for every grade level. They were far more rigorous than anything we had ever known in this state. But we knew they still had problems. We were hearing it from our teachers. We had areas such as K-3, English language arts, that needed to be strengthened. We needed writing standards strengthened. We needed to take a close look at where the mathematics content standards really should lie, especially as that middle schooler was transitioning into the high school. So in 2008, Governor Perdue and many of his Republican governors, quite honestly, folks, were working together to talk about, we're all working on this same work. Many of those states had indeed developed their own standards just like we had. But it was time to take that second look. So when the governors certainly got together, and I believe it was Governor Markell of Delaware, who was a Democrat, but Governor Perdue and Governor Markell got together, decided they would share this effort where states would come together and certainly talk about what are the commonalities that we need to look at in terms of our standards. And that's working with the Council of Chief State School Officers in this country, all the chiefs. At the time, that was Superintendent Cox, now it is Superintendent Barge. They were a great partner in that endeavor, and that's how Common Core really began to take shape. It was driven by governors. So what happened in Georgia, we worked for 2 years, literally working with others across this nation, teachers, board members, stakeholders, going to different kinds of convenings to really put those standards together. And in the result was the infusion of Common Core state standards into our Georgia Performance Standards. They were never a switch. We never threw our standards away and replaced them by Common Core. We used the Common Core to make ours better. And I wanted to tell you that story as we began talking about this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and it is a privilege to be with you tonight and just to share our thoughts and on Common Core. And Senator Millar is a good friend of mine, and like a good friend who's gone astray, I'm on a mission to bring him back into the fold. The issues of Common Core is as much about governance as it is about education. Historically, the arena of education has rested with the states, and it's been that way under the Constitution and under federal law. In fact, the United States Department of Education Organizational Act expressly states that the federal government is not to have any direction, supervision over curriculum, program of instruction, which starts getting pretty close to standards, or administration of schools. And Georgia has operated under that. And just as Dr. Reichrath said, we've set our standards. And in fact, in 2008, we had a fairly complete review of our standards. And those standards were very good. The Fordham Institute reviewed those standards and said that these standards were that Georgia was one of 12 states that had standards as good as or better than the Common Core standards. And they specifically went into great detail pointing out those areas where Georgia's standards were far superior. So that begs the question, why do you go backwards? But go backwards and change we did, and these Common Core standards, in essence, we changed our governance, and now the standards weren't determined here in Georgia, but they were determined by a consortium of states, which means that our voice was diluted, working with nonprofits funded by large corporations that have an interest in this, and working with federal money, and the program, the compliance with these standards were to be under the oversight of the United States Department of Education. And when we signed up for that grant, the terms of the conditions of those standards could not be changed. We were allowed to add 15% to those standards, but we couldn't change it. So in essence, we traded our ability to come in and adjust a standard that wasn't working, that needs work, to having to work through a consortium of states to get their permission to change it if we needed to change it. That's a loss of a tremendous amount of control. But we're told, well, this was state-led because the Governors Association signed us up for this. Well, what is the National Governors Association? It's a trade organization. It's not subject to open records laws. We don't even know who the members are. We don't know what the vote was. We don't know what deliberations occurred. We don't know what information was processed, because it's not open and transparent like our system of government that we have now. We know what goes on in our government because we have laws that require that. And because of that, there are certain issues that have come up. And these have been apparent to us. We've had to withdraw from the testing component, the PARC, for two reasons. One, because of the funding. But the other reason that was articulated was because we did not have control over what would be on that test. And control is an important issue. Secondly, we know that the reviews were rushed. I have a Department of Education study that was put out to teachers and parents online. And perhaps one of the most important questions that was asked which is, are these standards clear? Do they cover key content? And are they appropriately rigorous? In math from kindergarten through 8th grade, over 60% of the respondents said no, they did not meet those requirements. And the high school standards fared just as well. In some cases, 100% disagreement that those standards